Hi, this is Dana Peterson, and this training module is intended to review Lean Six Sigma. Upon completion of this learning module, you should have an understanding of the definition of Lean and Six Sigma and how companies leverage them together. Identify elements that contribute to Lean Six Sigma success. And lastly, identify the 5 phases of Lean Six Sigma and what each phase is responsible for to drive process improvements. So taking a look at the definition of Lean and Six Sigma, really what it is a problem-solving methodology that uses a combination of the two. So Lean means continuous elimination of unnecessary non-value added steps within a process. And then Six Sigma, it basically stands for the Greek letter omega, and that is producing better products and services faster and at lower cost, right? So when you're looking at the synergy between Lean and Six Sigma, what you really want to be doing is making sure that you're working on the right things and then making sure that things are being done right the first time. So in a nutshell, really what Lean and Six Sigma is all about is looking at new or existing processes and figuring out the best way to most effectively either roll out a new process or enhance an existing process. So if you were to drill into Lean Six Sigma, there really are some key elements to ensuring that um, new processes or procedures that you're rolling out are as successful as part of the Lean Six Sigma process. So the first one is you really need to gain executive ownership and commitment, making sure that leadership is aligned with what the Lean Six Sigma process is looking to accomplish. You need to ensure that you provide proper training. There's champions that are involved as part of Lean Six Sigma, black belts, green belts, as well as leadership teams that are involved as part of the process. You need to ensure that you're picking the right projects, have the right project teams aligned, as well as the project contracts, right? As part of the Lean Six Sigma success, you really need to have a project contract, which basically provides everybody the details and outlines the commitments that the project is looking to accomplish. You need financial accountability, participation from your finance group if it pertains. You need to ensure that knowledge sharing and communication is occurring. If you don't have that communication and knowledge sharing, your chances of success are very minimal. You need to ensure that you have customer and supplier involvement. One of the key things to drive involvement is ensuring that you have rewards and recognition as part of the process. And then lastly, making sure that you have continuous metric measurements in place to view progress and success ratios or rates. Okay, so just taking a quick look at the 5 phases of Lean Six Sigma, better known as the DMAIC, DMAIC. First phase is the define phase, where you define the problem and its objectives. The second phase is the measure. What do you need to improve? Can it be measured? Analyze the process, define the factors that influence. Improve process or phase, identify and implement improvements. And then lastly, the control phase, assure that improvements are sustainable through some type of measurement. Okay, so just taking a look at the define phase, looking to break it down a little bit further. The first thing that really what the define phase does is that it identifies the problem, as well as looking at the scope of the problem or of what you're looking to try to accomplish. The next thing is define the customer and the critical metrics. Who is the customer of that problem or process? define the stakeholders and the customers, and then define the high-level process, or that would be the existing process. And then just looking at the tools that you would leverage as part of the define phase, you would draw up the business case, which would basically outline, current costs versus return on investment costs that you would get from implementing a new phase or process. Outline the scope. You could leverage an IPO diagram to do that. As I said earlier, you have the problem statement. And then lastly, most important is probably the goals. You need to define the goals of this particular phase or of the project. Okay, so moving on to the measure phase. What's important as part of this phase? The first thing is, probably the most important as part of this phase is you need to define the defect or the opportunity, right? You need to measure the baseline of the process and the data on its critical metrics. Outline the current process, measure the current capability of the process, refocus or rescope if required. If that process needs to be redefined, then this is where you should do it here. And then as part of the tools that are leveraged, obviously the process flow chart, as I mentioned, existing benchmarks, existing data for the current process, run charts, how is the process, what are the data, what are the process outputs. You need to ensure that you include the voice of the customer. And then lastly, you need to ensure that you have a good data collection strategy to be able to properly measure this phase. All right, so the next phase, or phase 3, is the analyze phase. This is where you're taking what you've collected from the previous phase, the measure phase, and now you want to drill into the data. What's important as part of this phase, you need to analyze the waste and causes of poor performance. You need to understand the root cause of that waste and poor performance. Why is the process doing what it's doing? You need to establish what causes the variation within the process. If there are things that make that process go awry or cause the output to be incorrect, this is where you need to understand that variation. And then prioritize the critical few causes and variables. This is where this phase really is where you drive the cause and effect conversations using the data or brainstorming and prioritizing tools in order to find the areas to improve on. So just looking at some of the tools that are leveraged as part of this process, a lot of these, you can find these in Excel. Pareto charts, scatter plots, cause and effect fishbone charts, statistical analysis, process review and analysis charts. All of these, as I said, can be found in Excel and are very effective to be leveraged during the analyze phase. Okay, so phase 4, the improve phase. This is really the money phase of the whole Six Sigma process. This is really where you generate the solutions based on the metrics that you've acquired from the earlier phases. And then, basically look to identify where the process can be improved on, right? So what's important in this phase? You need to identify the solutions to test, validate the improvements, mistake-proof the process, develop improved plan, and then eliminate the defects. As I said, this is where everything or the new steps within the process get defined and implemented. So looking at the tools to be leveraged as part of this phase, obviously you're going to have a new process flow, you're going to have charts and graphs, you're going to have SOPs and standard operating procedures, right? If you have a new process, you're going to need new procedures generally. Cost savings calculations. This is really your return on investment. What what it cost you before, and now where are the improvements? What's that return on investment? And then lastly is the control plan. Okay, so phase 5, the last phase, the control phase. So you've developed you've done all your measurements, you've analyzed the data, you've implemented new process. Now you need to control those new processes, right? You can't just walk away. So what's important as part of this phase? You need to define and validate the control systems, verify the cost benefits, develop standards and procedures, and then once this is all done, then you hand it off to the process owners. And their primary responsibility is to ensure that that process remains consistent. And then also as part of this control phase, you need to measure those improvements and make sure that you're truly gaining that benefit. So tools that are leveraged as part of this phase: control charts, control plan, and then lastly the cost savings calculation. So in a nutshell, those are really the 5 phases as part of the Lean Six Sigma process. Okay, so just to review some discussion questions relevant to the topic of this training module. The first one is identify the key benefits and drawbacks of lean production for an organization. Next, describe 3 areas outside of production that lean is used by businesses today and what benefit does it provide to each area. Lastly, describe what Kaizen is and as it pertains to Lean Six Sigma and what 5 elements it consists of. Okay, and lastly, there is some additional supplementary material around Lean, as well as Six Sigma, as well as some information in regards to Kaizens. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for taking the time to review it.